Well, I just feel like composition itself is just inherently oppressive, with all the rules and stuff. So I decided for this project to not compose at all. Okay, fine, it's not that deep, but sometimes as a street photographer, in order to get the shots that you want, you have to break the rules of photography, and that can include composition in general. But shooting without looking is more than just spray and pray. There is a method to the madness. Hunter, you can't take good photos without looking. Yeah, it turns out you kind of can, and I'll show you why and how you can take photos that you would have locked yourself out of taking if you didn't. First, I think we should clear up what I mean when I'm saying not looking. Like, there's a scale of not looking, right? There's like having a vague idea of where your camera is pointing all the way down to having your eye right above the viewfinder. And all of them have a place. Maybe for now, let's just steer clear of the complete blind fire. Let's start with the most looky and then work our way down the list to the most bonkers ones. Putting your eye here instead of here feels silly. Why wouldn't you just look? Well, putting your eye just above the camera means that you still have a pretty good idea of where your frame is and what's going to be inside and outside of your frame lines, with the bonus of allowing you to connect with your subject a little bit more. I've talked about eye contact before, and this is kind of the same idea, but like backwards. When you're doing event photos or street portraits or maybe even protests, you want people to feel comfortable and natural so that they look comfortable and natural. Having a camera in front of your face so that they can't see you can be a little bit alienating. Allowing us to maintain our eye contact like that means you can keep the banter flowing, keep the laughs, keep that connection while you're snapping away. Now, it's important to remember that these are probably not the best techniques if you're shooting a long lens like an 85. These techniques work best when you're shooting with a fairly wide lens that you're very, very comfortable with. For me, that's a 28. I've been shooting with a 28 for so long that I can very easily visually pick out where the frame lines of a 28 will be. And so I'm not so much guessing my composition as estimating. These no-look ideas might not be great for bird photography. But I hear you say, you said not looking, and that's looking. That's cheating. So let's talk about the second most looky type of no-look photography, and that's shooting from the hip. Feel lucky? Well, do ya? But first, go ahead. Make my day by liking this video and subscribing so that we can hang out and talk about street photography more. Shooting from the hip. Okay, shooting from the hip gets a bad rap, and I think that that's because a lot of new or nervous street photographers use it as a bit of a crutch, but shooting from the hip is an incredibly powerful technique when you do it right. For example, if you've been shooting street for any amount of time, you'll be fairly familiar with being approached by weirdos. Sometimes when you're shooting street, I guess just being open and looking like someone who's just experiencing being in public, weirdos will just come up to you and start telling you their theories about the Peruvian temples on the surface of the moon. And just angling your camera up from the strap and shooting blind, you can get some pretty interesting photos. But more importantly than that, if you're shooting in protests with angry people or even just in confined spaces like the tube, it can be quite important to be very discreet. Would I like to have taken my time to frame up and compose this photo? Yes. But in doing so, would I have inevitably been spotted and changed the nature of what was going on in the photo? Also yes. So we're shooting from the hip. Surely that's as unhinged as this gets, right? No, not quite. The next step down the no-look ladder is overheads. My photographic specialty is chaos. Anything involving big crowds is where I make my best work. Live music, protests, riots, hooligans, parties, nightclubs. The only problem I have when shooting in crowds, and especially tightly packed crowds, is that I'm short. Like, quite short. Sometimes overheads are the only way to show as much as I want to show, but I'm not just hoping for the best. The idea with overheads is to, in the crowd, pick your subject, visualize your focal length frame lines around them, and put them bang in the middle. When you're shooting in crowds, your composition is going to be chaotic and busy no matter what, so why not lean into it? I want the viewer to feel the chaos that was there, and that comes across sometimes with crazy framing and stuff coming in from the foreground. And sometimes I even deliberately leave my horizons crooked, which I'm sure will upset some of you a lot. I'm not sorry. Okay, so we've done eye level, hip level, normal people height level. That's it, right? No. The final way I shoot without looking is the most certifiably insane. It's the most ridiculous and the riskiest. When I've done this, when I'm shooting with other photographers, I get one of two reactions from this. They either think it's the coolest thing they've ever seen and they start trying to do it themselves, or they never want to be seen with me in a professional context ever again. I call it the hole punch. Basically, sometimes I need to get closer fast. Sometimes I can see someone really interesting a few rows back in a crowd and there are too many people in front of them. Or sometimes I just need to get to an angle that I can move my arm to, but not myself. Essentially, I hold the camera out and fire away, usually in quick succession. Remember, I'm still thinking about my framing and I'm still thinking about composition. I'm just not looking through the viewfinder because I need to move the camera as fast as I can to catch a fleeting moment. In super chaotic environments, this happens super fast. I'm almost always at a 500th of a second or above. I shoot my arm out, take the photo, and then pull it back in quickly so I can advance the film. I don't do the hole punch unless I have to, but that's the thing with all of these no-look camera techniques. Is it better to carefully frame up and compose every photo? Of course it is. But I'd rather stick my camera in the air and see what happens than not try to get the shot at all. And that's kind of the whole idea here. I think it's really easy to get caught up in our heads about which techniques are pro and which ones are amateur and what we should and shouldn't do as photographers. I think it's a much more fun, much more artistically freeing and rewarding strategy to just shoot everything that we can think of and then decide later on if it's any good and whether we want to share it. Shooting blind can unlock a whole new level for your street photography, but it does require a fair bit of practice and a little bit of insanity. Hold on a moment, you're saying? How do you make sure that they're in focus if you're using a film camera? You're not looking through the viewfinder. Well, I made a video specifically about how I do that, which you can watch next. Stay hydrated and create art.